The situation in Palestine is a bloody mess. The streets are filled with debris and the air is thick with tension and despair. And it's been that way for decades. Generations have grown up knowing nothing but conflict and hardship. We're talking about a place where homes are bulldozed, families are torn apart, and violence is a daily occurrence. The constant threat of losing everything hangs over every Palestinian family. The United Nations was created to stop this kind of horror. It was meant to be a beacon of hope and a force for peace in the world. But so far it's failed miserably when it comes to Palestine. The promises made have been broken time and time again, leaving the people of Palestine in a perpetual state of suffering. The UN has passed resolutions, sure. There have been countless meetings, discussions and votes, but resolutions without action are like thoughts and prayers. They don't actually stop bullets, they don't rebuild homes or heal the wounded. We need to talk about why the UN has been so useless, and more importantly, what it can actually do to fix this catastrophe. The time for empty promises is over, because people are dying and enough is enough. The world cannot stand by and watch as innocent lives are lost. This isn't just about politics, folks. This is about human rights, about the right to live in peace and security. This is about human lives. It's about families being able to stay together, children being able to play without fear. This is about kids growing up with bombs instead of bedtime stories. It's about the future of an entire generation being stolen away. And it's way past time for the UN to step up and actually do something meaningful. The world is watching, and history will judge us by our actions, not our words. The UN Security Council sounds important, right? It is. It's like the UN's VIP section where the big decisions are supposed to be made. 5 countries, the United States, Russia, China, France and the UK, get to be permanent members. They also get something called veto power. What does that mean? It means any one of these countries can single-handedly block any action by the Security Council. Even if the other 186 countries in the UN agree on something, one veto, and it's dead in the water. Guess who uses their veto power the most to protect Israel, no matter what it does? You got it, the United States. This isn't about taking sides in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. This is about recognizing that one country's political agenda shouldn't be able to paralyze the entire world's efforts for peace. Let's be honest, folks. International relations are messy. And sometimes countries care more about their own interests than about doing the right thing. When it comes to Palestine, there are a lot of powerful players with a lot at stake. Some countries have strong economic ties with Israel. Others are worried about upsetting the United States, which is a big supporter of Israel. And some are just happy to turn a blind eye to the suffering of the Palestinian people because it's easier than rocking the boat. This isn't just a problem with Palestine, by the way. It happens all over the world. But it's a huge part of the reason why the UN has been so ineffective. When push comes to shove, self-interest often wins out over human rights. Let's say you break the law. You get arrested, right? The police come, they put you in handcuffs and you're taken away. It's a clear process with clear consequences. You go to court, and if you're found guilty, there are consequences. You might pay a fine, serve time in jail, or face other penalties. The system is designed to ensure accountability. The UN is supposed to work kind of like that for countries. It's meant to be the global authority that steps in when nations break the rules. When a country commits human rights abuses or violates international law, there are supposed to be mechanisms in place to hold them accountable. These mechanisms include investigations, reports and resolutions. The problem is, these mechanisms are about as effective as a screen door on a submarine. They look good on paper, but fail in practice. The UN can investigate, it can issue reports, it can condemn, but it can't really force anyone to do anything. It lacks the power to enforce its own resolutions, and when it comes to Palestine, that's a serious problem. The ongoing conflict and human rights violations demand more than just words. We need real consequences for actions. Sanctions that are truly effective, not just symbolic gestures. We need sanctions that hurt. Sanctions that make countries think twice before violating international norms. We need international tribunals that can actually bring perpetrators to justice. tribunals that have the authority and the means to enforce their verdicts. Until then, the UN is just a bunch of strongly worded letters, and that's not going to save any lives. We need a system that works, one that can truly hold countries accountable and protect human rights. Section 5. Ceasefire. Now, the first step to breathing room. Okay, so we've established that the situation is a disaster. The images of destruction and the stories of suffering are heart-wrenching, and the UN has been about as useful as a chocolate teapot. What now? The international community seems paralyzed, unable to take decisive action. Well, the first step is simple. Stop the damn fighting. It sounds straightforward, but it's a monumental task. We need a ceasefire, and we need it yesterday. The urgency cannot be overstated. I know what you're thinking, John. That's incredibly obvious. You're right, it is. But obvious doesn't mean easy. But sometimes the most obvious solutions are the hardest to implement. The political will and the logistics are daunting. The UN needs to use every ounce of its diplomatic muscle. This means relentless negotiations, back-channel communications, and leveraging every possible influence to get both sides to agree to a ceasefire. This is not just a call for peace, it's a call for survival. And I mean a real ceasefire, one that holds firm and gives people a chance to breathe, not one that lasts for 5 minutes before the bombs start dropping again. A genuine pause in hostilities is essential. This isn't about negotiating a final peace agreement, it's about creating a foundation for future peace. It's about creating a space where people can breathe, where the immediate threat of violence is removed, where aid can get through, where humanitarian efforts can reach those in desperate need, and where negotiations can actually begin. Real meaningful dialogue can only happen in a stable environment. It's about stopping the bleeding, so to speak, halting the immediate crisis. Before we can even think about healing the wounds, only then can we start the long process of rebuilding and reconciliation. Section 6. War crimes aren't free trials, holding perpetrators accountable. We can't just slap a band-aid on this situation and call it a day. People have died, homes have been destroyed, lives have been shattered. There need to be consequences for the atrocities that have been committed. And that means holding war crime investigations and trials. This isn't about revenge, it's about justice. It's about showing the world that we take international law seriously and that there are consequences for violating it. It's about sending a message that this kind of brutality will not be tolerated. The International Criminal Court exists for exactly this reason. The UN needs to fully support the ICC's investigations into both Israeli and Palestinian actions and ensure that anyone found guilty of war crimes is held accountable. No exceptions, no excuses. Section 7. Hit 'em where it hurts. Sanctions that bite, not nibble. Remember those consequences we were talking about? Sanctions are a big part of that. When a country behaves badly, the international community can hit them where it hurts, their wallets. We're talking about economic sanctions that limit trade, freeze assets, and make it harder for a country to do business as usual. Now, sanctions can be controversial. They can sometimes harm ordinary citizens more than the government officials they're meant to target. But when used strategically and in conjunction with other measures, they can be an effective tool for changing behavior. The UN needs to impose targeted sanctions on individuals and entities on both sides of the conflict that are perpetuating the violence. And these can't be just symbolic gestures. They need to be sanctions with teeth, sanctions that actually make a difference. Section 8. Aid that actually aids getting help where it's needed. The humanitarian situation in Gaza is beyond dire. People are living without access to clean water, adequate healthcare, or even enough food to survive. The UN has a moral obligation to provide humanitarian aid to those who need it most. And I'm not talking about a few truckloads of rice here and there. We're talking about a massive, coordinated effort to provide food, water, shelter, and medical care to the people of Gaza. We're talking about rebuilding infrastructure, supporting hospitals, and helping families get back on their feet. This is not a handout, folks. This is about basic human decency. It's about recognizing that everyone, regardless of where they live or what they believe, deserves to live with dignity and have their basic needs met. Section 9. You're not powerless. What you can do right now. I know, it's easy to feel helpless in the face of such overwhelming suffering, but here's the thing. You're not helpless. You have a voice and you can use it to demand action. Contact your elected officials. Donate to organizations providing aid in Gaza. Educate yourself and others about the conflict. Share information on social media. The more people who speak out, the louder the message becomes, and the harder it is for those in power to ignore it. This isn't about being pro-Israel or pro-Palestine. This is about being pro-humanity. It's about standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult. It's about demanding justice, demanding peace, and refusing to stay silent in the face of injustice. Get informed, get involved, and get loud. The world is watching.